Every summer, for years, a man packed a cooler, loaded his wife and 2 young kids into the car, and drove to a quiet wooded spot for a picnic. He'd lay out a blanket. His children would play in the grass a few feet away, and he would check, carefully, without ever saying why, that the ground beneath them hadn't been disturbed. Because buried there, under the same patch of earth his own kids ran across, was a 16-year-old girl he had murdered. He lived 200 yards from her grave. He raised his family beside it. And for 7 years, no one, not the police, not her parents, not the town that never stopped looking for her, had any idea. In the summer of 1987, Au Sable Forks, New York, was a town built on trust, nestled at the edge of the Adirondack Mountains, the kind of place where everyone knew their neighbors, and the rhythms of daily life felt safe and predictable. This wasn't a community that feared the dark. Danger, if it existed at all, was always assumed to live somewhere else. Kari Lynn Nixon was 16, an above-average student, a singer, an aspiring writer, and the pitcher on her high school softball team, a beloved daughter with deep roots in her community. There was nothing in her life to suggest trouble was coming. That changed on one ordinary errand. On the evening of June 22nd, her father, Gary, asked her to run to Thomas's country store, just a few blocks away. Kari left her own money sitting on her dresser, a small detail that would later matter to investigators, and took the $20 her father handed her instead. She walked out the door around 9:30 p.m. The store clerk knew her by name, rang her up at 9:55 p.m. A bill, just over $3. 10 minutes later, at 10:05, a neighbor saw her walking home, less than 700 feet from her front door. They exchanged greetings. She kept walking. 5 minutes after that, a group of teenage boys walked down that same street. The street was empty. When Kari's mother, Kathy, woke up the next morning and found her daughter's bed hadn't been slept in, her first reaction was terror. She called Kari's friends first. Nobody had heard from her. Then, she called the police. Kathy would later put it simply, "I don't think we realized how much hope we had until we didn't have any." The search that followed was massive. Volunteers from local fire departments and a nearby Air Force base joined police to canvass roughly 50 square miles around the town. They combed fields, they searched outbuildings, they walked the banks of the nearby river. They found nothing, not one piece of physical evidence, not a single trace. For a town that had always measured danger in the abstract, that silence was its own kind of horror. Investigators looked hard at the idea that Kari had run away. It wasn't a baseless theory. Friends told police she'd written to them on 3 separate occasions about wanting to leave Au Sable Forks. First, it was Hawaii, then Florida, then, once she turned 18, California. For a moment, that gave investigators a thread to pull. It led nowhere. She had no money beyond what her father had given her that night. No history of running, no reason anyone could find for her to vanish on her own. New York State Police Captain Robert Lowe put it plainly, "My theory on this case is Kari Lynn Nixon was abducted. She's walked off the face of the earth as far as we're concerned." The case went cold, and the numbers behind that coldness tell their own story. Over the following years, investigators chased down roughly 70 reported sightings of Kari across the country. They conducted more than 1,500 interviews. They examined over 200 sets of unidentified remains, searching for one confirmation that never came. For Gary and Kathy Nixon, life became a cycle of hope and despair that would repeat itself, in different forms, for years. Months after Kari vanished, an anonymous letter arrived, postmarked from Flint, Michigan, claiming Kari was living in Utahville, South Carolina, nearly 1,000 miles away. The Nixons had no connection to either place. They went anyway. In Utahville, a woman named Shirley Canapel came forward. She'd met a shy young girl in a local park who introduced herself as Kari Lynn Nixon, giving the missing girl's exact middle name. For a moment, it seemed like the answer had finally surfaced 1,000 miles from home. It hadn't. The sightings were never confirmed. The trail went cold again. A year and a half later, 2 more letters arrived, postmarked from Flint again. Handwriting analysis matched the first. Police searched Utahville a second time. Nothing. Then, in 1989, a videotape surfaced. Concert footage from a New Kids on the Block music video shoot in Los Angeles. In the crowd was a girl the Nixon family believed was Kari. Investigators didn't dismiss it. They had the footage professionally enhanced and compared against a recent photo of Kari. Hair length, hair color, face shape, even the exact placement of her ear piercings. All lined up. Band members Jonathan and Jordan Knight made personal televised appeals. Jonathan asking the girl in the video to come forward. Jordan asking anyone who'd seen her at a concert to call police. For months, an entire fan base held its breath alongside a grieving family. In 1993, the girl was identified. Her name was Lynette Melanchon, a young woman from California, with no connection to the case at all. For the Nixons, this wasn't just another dead end. It quietly confirmed something worse. The answer wasn't out there in the world. It was still at home. For 7 years, the case sat cold. Then, in January 1994, a 29-year-old carpenter named Robert Anthony Jones was arrested, not for Kari's murder, but for a string of bank robberies across northeastern New York and Maine, committed between 1987 and 1993. Jones had grown up in Au Sable Forks. His parents' home was only about 3 miles from Kari's own. His wife, Teresa, had driven the getaway car for one of the robberies, with their 2 young children, ages 5 and 7, in the back seat. Facing her own federal charges, she told police her husband had confessed to killing Kari years earlier. In an effort to get her a lighter sentence, Jones agreed to confess himself. What he described next was worse than anyone had let themselves imagine. He told police he'd seen Kari at the store that night while buying beer. At a 2011 parole hearing, Jones stated he'd been angry that Teresa had cheated on him and that anger became the reason he followed Kari and forced her into his car at gunpoint. He drove her to his father's remote cabin in the nearby town of Jay. According to Kathy Nixon's own account, given repeatedly at parole hearings, he raped her for hours, then strangled her, and when that failed, shot her twice in the chest. The next morning, he buried her in a shallow grave in the woods. What happened 3 years later is the detail that still unsettles people who know this case. In 1990, Jones moved his own family back to the Au Sable Forks area, settling into a home roughly 200 yards from where Kari's body lay buried. Every summer after that, he brought his wife and 2 young children to that same wooded spot for a picnic, not out of guilt, but to check that the grave hadn't been disturbed. On January 28, 1994, as part of his plea agreement, Robert Jones led state troopers to that wooded property. There, after nearly 7 years, they found Kari Lynn Nixon. Buried with her remains were the groceries she'd bought that night. Jones pleaded guilty to first-degree kidnapping, first-degree rape, and second-degree murder. As part of the deal that kept his wife out of prison, he was sentenced to 18 years to life, served concurrently with his 15-year robbery sentence. Prosecutors weren't happy with the deal, but one of them, Assistant U.S. Attorney Bernard Malone, later admitted why they agreed to it anyway. Initially, both of the Clinton County and Essex County district attorneys were understandably upset with this proposal, Malone wrote years later. But upon reflection and much discussion with Kari Lynn's long grieving parents, the dance with the devil began. Teresa received 2 years probation for her role in the robberies. She and Jones later divorced. Jones served his federal robbery sentence first, then was transferred to state prison in 2005 to begin serving time specifically for Kari's murder. His first parole hearing came in September 2011, and it was denied. It's been denied every time since, including his most recent hearings on record. Before every single one of those hearings, one woman has shown up to make sure the board never forgets what happened. Kathy Nixon has personally recounted her daughter's murder to the Board of Parole ahead of every hearing for over a decade. He strangled her, and then he shot her twice in the chest, she has told reporters. She died alone, begging for her life. "I'm Kari's advocate," she said. "I have to let everybody know the viciousness of what he did." Residents of Au Sable Forks have organized letter-writing campaigns to the parole board every time Jones has come up for release, determined that he stay exactly where he is. "Nothing has changed," Kathy has said. Kari is still gone. He is still the one that kidnapped, raped, and murdered her. Asked whether Jones has ever expressed remorse, her answer has been simple: "I don't ever believe that he's ever said he's sorry." A 2018 appeal, arguing his original confession shouldn't have been allowed as evidence, was rejected outright by the courts. As of that ruling, Jones, by then in his 50s, remained incarcerated at a state facility in New York. Retired state police investigator Richard Sipek, who spent years personally chasing leads on Kari's behalf across the country, later said he'd come to know her, like one of his own daughters. When Kari's story first aired on Unsolved Mysteries in 1989, it was her own younger sister, 15-year-old Lori, who portrayed her in the reenactment. Kari's brother John died in 2007 from ALS, at 29, the same age Jones had been the night he killed her. John named his own daughter Kari Lynn, after the aunt she'd never meet. Kari's father Gary passed away in 2011. In her memory, her parents established a scholarship fund in her name, ensuring it would go on being attached to something good, long after they themselves were gone. There's one more thread to this story, one the Nixon family never asked for, and never wanted. Kari Lynn Nixon and a young woman named Kathy Hobbs were born 12 days apart. On July 23, 1987, exactly 1 month after Kari was murdered, Kathy Hobbs was killed in Las Vegas, walking home late at night from a neighborhood market, just like Kari. The two cases are entirely unconnected. Investigators on both sides have confirmed there is no link between the men responsible. The parallel remains, simply, an unexplainable echo between two girls who never knew each other, born less than 2 weeks apart, killed almost exactly a month apart, both cut down in the last few hundred feet of an ordinary errand. This is the legacy of Kari Lynn Nixon's case. A small town's loss of innocence. A 7-year search that ended a few miles from where it began. And a family's love that outlasted 7 years of silence. A 1,000-mile trip on the strength of an anonymous letter. And a stranger's face on a concert tape they dared to hope was their daughter's. Thank you for watching. If you want us to keep covering real cold cases with the depth they deserve, please subscribe and turn on notifications. We will see you in the next case.